What's going on, YouTube? Welcome back to another Heart Over Height episode. Today we are going to, with the NBA season being right around the corner, being October 4th with the first games of the preseason, we're going to submit our final prediction standings 1 through 15 seeds. So if you do enjoy this content, do me a huge favor, smash the like button, subscribe to the YouTube channel, comment down below on who you think will be the best team in the NBA and who will be the worst. So without further ado, let's get right on into this. So you guys can see here, I got a whole tier list. We got 1 through 15. So on each tier, you're going to have two teams, one team from the East and one team from the West. So we're just going to jump right on into this. I'm going to give a little description as to why I feel as if each team deserves to be in the spot. So starting off as the worst team in the East, I think it will be the Washington Wizards. I don't really like anything that's really going on there. I'm not a huge fan of Alex Sarr so far from what I've seen from the preseason and everything. As far as one of their better players, they traded Deni Avdija. I don't love Jordan Poole over on that roster either. Now, I know a lot of people are thinking there's another team out there that is also very bad, which I'll get to them, don't worry. They're only one spot higher. But as far as the Wizards, I just don't think that they're going to be entertaining to watch at all. There's going to be another team that's above them that might be a little more entertaining to squeak out a win or two. But I'll get to them. For the West, the worst team in the West, I think it's going to be the Portland Trail Blazers. There's not too many teams that you can really say that are going to be worse than them. There's just not something that's super exciting. There's too many centers. They have Robert Williams, you have Donovan Clingan, you have DeAndre Ayton. I don't like seeing that. Same thing with the guards on the other side. You have too many guards. You have Anthony Simons, you have Scoot Henderson, who didn't look great last year, and then you have Shaedon Sharpe. So there's a lot of just question marks and no identity for this roster. And that's why both of these teams landed on the 15th spot, is because there's not really a true identity for their specific. There's no like bright spot for them. Now, as far as 14, the second to worst team in the East, I think it will be the Brooklyn Nets. Now, this team, why it's going to be better than the Wizards, it's because I think Cam Thomas is a bucket. I think that he's a very streaky shooter, as in he's going to have his super hot nights and his super cold nights, and I just think that the super hot nights are going to come to squeak out more wins versus, someone like the Wizards. They just don't really have a whole lot of guys, like especially Jordan Poole we thought would be similar to Cam Thomas on his own, but just wasn't. I also think you have guys like Nicholas Claxton and Cam Johnson on the roster as of right now that have not been traded that could provide some more wins as well. So that is why I put Washington below Brooklyn, but I do think both teams aren't going to be great. You might see just terrible play from both rosters. Second to worst team in the West, it is going to be the Utah Jazz. I think the Utah Jazz are on a fire sale right now, looking to trade anything and everything besides Lauri Markkanen. You could see them make a big splash trade, try and go get someone like Brandon Ingram. That might honestly skyrocket them on this list. But as of right now, with their current roster, only a week before we see preseason, you are going to see this roster is pretty tough. It's pretty bad. It's not great. Lauri Markkanen is the only real bright spot. Of course, you have Keontae George over there, which I think he's a decent player. I just don't think he's ready to take, that starting point guard role yet. So at number 13, another really bad team in the East. It is going to be the Chicago Bulls. I just think Montes Buzelis, too young to really flourish a whole lot right off the bat. You do have good guards there in Josh Giddey, Ayo Dosunmu, and of course Kobe White, but it's seemingly there's too many guards now, where Ayo is probably going to be coming off the bench, I guess. Like, they're not great defenders. You have Buzelis. You paid Patrick Williams a lot of money, which I don't really see the upside potential to Patrick Williams as some people do, but, that just goes to show, like, who knows what we're actually going to get out of him. At number 12 in the West, we do have the San Antonio Spurs. Now, the Spurs, I think they're going to be better than they were last year. I think that's a given, adding guys like Harrison Barnes, Chris Paul, drafting Stephon Castle, but I still don't think that they're quite ready. I think that they need some other star power besides Vic, and then Chris Paul's super old, so we don't really know what he's going to be like with the Spurs. as well as Harrison Barnes is not really fit to be like a number 2 option on a roster. He's very old at this point in his career. Just not the guy that you want being your secondary star on your roster. And who knows what we're going to get out of Stephon Castle on the offensive end. Defensively, he's going to be really good. So this team should be decent defensively. That's why I put them a little higher. But overall, yeah, I think that they're still 1 or 2 more years away from making, those bigger moves to go and win a lot more games. Okay, I've corrected the mistake I had. I had 2 13s there. So at number 12 here, we do have the Charlotte Hornets for the East. Just not going to be a great team. I am not a huge fan of LaMelo Ball being your number 1 option. I think that they need to transition over to a Brandon Miller centralized team and let him flourish and just go get pieces that fit him. LaMelo Ball is just showcased too many times that it's just injury after injury after injury. We just don't see full seasons out of him. As far as on the west side, this one might shock some people just because they, of course, do have 2 quote-unquote stars. I just don't know what we're going to see out of them. It is the Clippers. The Clippers I'm not excited about. They don't have a good roster. I don't think Kawhi is going to play a whole lot. They just got a brand new arena, and then you let a guy like Paul George walk away. I don't think that they're going to be very exciting to watch. There's just not too many bright spots that I see, especially if James Harden, making as much money as he doesn't play a whole lot of games, and then same thing with Kawhi Leonard. At 11 here, I do have the Detroit Pistons. Now, a lot of people are probably going to have them a little bit lower, maybe below the Bulls and the Hornets, but for me, I think adding on those vets like Tim Hardaway Jr., Tobias Harris, even like Malik Beasley is going to be a huge thing for them. Going to be able to help out these younger players, just develop their shot a little bit more, as well as they brought in a coaching change that was much needed. I think Cade Cunningham is finally going to have a lot of space to work with, a lot more space than before, and you're really going to see what we can get out of Jaden Ivey this season. So then moving over to the West, I have the Golden State Warriors. I don't think Golden State is a good roster as of right now. They didn't really do too much. I don't love Buddy Hield being on this roster with Kyle Anderson off the bench. Like, it's just not great. I think Buddy Hield by himself as a 6-man role is a prime candidate for 6-man of the year if they do kind of click. But you lost a lot when you let Klay Thompson go, and you haven't really replenished a whole lot there, as well as it's not only about their roster, but the other rosters ahead of them, I think, are just a little bit better. So as far as number 10 in the East, I think that this one's an easy one. This one's the Atlanta Hawks. I don't know what they're doing. I don't know whether they're going full rebuild. I understand that they don't really have a whole lot of their own draft picks because of the DeJounte Murray trade that they made with San Antonio a couple years ago. But San Antonio wants Trae Young. Maybe you go trade Trae Young to the Spurs, and then you go and get your own draft capital back. Then you're bad, and then you go and try and get a guy like Cooper Flagg to pair alongside your number 1 pick in this year's draft, Ricochet. I think that would have been the best option for them. They haven't done anything like that quite yet. I've heard them in rumors for, like, they were in the rumor for the Cat deal and everything like that, and Brandon Ingram, etc. I don't really know where they're going. Like, what is the direction here? Are you rebuilding, going younger, or are you in the mix for a guy like Karl-Anthony Towns and you're trying to win now? It's just very confusing. But of course, if you have Trae Young on your team going into the regular season, he's gonna help you win some games because he's instant offense. So number 10 in the West, it is LeBron's last season, in my opinion. I don't think he's really going to squeak out too many more years as he continues to age, and this roster doesn't get any better year in, year out. I think that if he did have an insanely good roster that was constantly competing for championships, he probably would last a few more years, but because of the current state of roster that didn't really change a whole lot, that hasn't really done too much together with guys like Austin Reeves and everything, just not being able to put together a full championship run, then that is a huge problem, of course. So, I just look at the Lakers just not being too good this year, not being able to make a run, but still being in the play-in, and LeBron's going to do whatever he can to just make it as far in the playoffs as he possibly can. That takes us to number 9 in the East. I have the Toronto Raptors here. The Raptors could be extremely interesting because they have a lot of pieces that can click at any point in time. Guys like Scotty Barnes, Emmanuel Quickley, RJ Barrett, they have a little bit of like an underdog mentality there that are just very interesting, intriguing pieces that I am interested to see what they can do together with a full offseason under their belt. They played decently well, and then RJ Barrett looked insanely good for Canada, so I'm excited to see him with Toronto and kind of given the keys a little bit more to do his own thing. Now, number 9 in the West, this is a team that did acquire a new piece in this offseason. It is the Sacramento Kings, adding DeMar DeRozan, another play-in team competitor, and will they make it out of the play-in? We don't know quite yet, of course, but I think the pairing with De'Aaron Fox, DeMar DeRozan, Domantas Sabonis is just going to take some time to learn and gel together. So you might see them get off to a bit of a slow start just as they're trying to figure out spacing and everything with incorporating the guys like Kevin Huerter, Keegan Murray, Malik Monk. A lot of people are assuming Malik might transition to the starting lineup. I still think that he's better off the bench kind of thing. Just one of those Manu Ginobili-esque players. But over at number 8 here, I have the Miami Heat. The Miami Heat are a good roster, decent roster at least. I just don't love the bench. The depth is not really there. Guys coming off your bench, super old Kevin Love. You have Duncan Robinson, Alec Burks, like just not anything crazy there. And then they have Terry Rozier, who's an interesting piece, dealt with some injuries last year. We don't really know what we're going to get out of Jimmy Butler, but I do expect a decent season out of him. I would probably take the over on, points per night kind of thing, points per game for the season and everything, because he's up for a contract. Somebody's going to pay him a bag, especially if he pops off. At number 8 in the West, it is the Houston Rockets. I debated between the Lakers, the Kings, and the Rockets on 8 through 10, and honestly the Warriors were in this mix too, of which roster do I like the best between the 4, and I think that it is the Rockets. I like the veteranship that they have with Fred VanVleet. You even have like Jeff Green, Dylan Brooks, a lot of decent vets, Alperen Sengun, Jalen Green here. But then you also have very young talent, Cam Whitmore, Reed Shepherd, that's just intriguing and looked really good in the Summer League and hopefully can take another step here. Now at number 7 for the East, this might be the lowest that a lot of people will have this team, but it is the Milwaukee Bucks for me. I'm just not a huge fan of the roster construction. I think that Damian Lillard and Giannis haven't really quite figured it out yet on how they're supposed to work well together, as well as Brook Lopez is super old, Chris Middleton a bit injury prone. It's just nothing that I trust compared to these other Eastern Conference teams. I know that Giannis is going to go win you some games because he's Giannis, but I just don't trust them long run, especially if he goes down with a tweaked ankle and he's out for a few weeks or something like that. Who can you trust on this roster, especially with Dame's off-court issues and everything? I think that, of course, he'll have a better season this year, especially since they've had a full offseason together now. I just don't trust their roster like I do these other Eastern Conference teams. And speaking of number 7 on the other side of the ball, we do have a team that is going to have a fresh start here, and it is the Memphis Grizzlies. They're a roster that had a lot of injury bug last year, just didn't really get a whole lot of time to play together, especially with Ja Morant getting injured very early after his return from his suspension. So I have them at 7 just because of the other Western teams. I think that they could be a lot higher and shock the world a little bit and go up to even like a 3-4 seed with the possibility of that, just because last time the roster was fully healthy, they were able to string together. I think they were the 3rd seed. Yeah, I think that there's tons of potential here for the Grizzlies for sure. At number 6 in the East, I have the Indiana Pacers, and why I have the Pacers over the Bucks is just regular season. It seems like the Pacers are built for the regular season. They're very fast, they're very quick, they're going to outscore you a lot. Now, as the game slows down and the defense needs to pick up, that's where they tended to struggle, and that's why they didn't make the finals, as well as the talent level of the Celtics. It's a crazy good roster. So the Pacers should be better, though. They should be a good threat defensively and offensively. Tyrese Halliburton just getting healthier and healthier each and every day, as well as now incorporating Pascal Siakam for a full offseason. I like the Pacers and what they're going to do this year. At the 6th seed for the West, it is the New Orleans Pelicans. Interesting roster, of course, because they brought in newly acquired DeJounte Murray. Now, DeJounte Murray is an interesting player because I think that he's going to work great with Zion. I think that they can run interesting pick and roll options and then kick it out to these good shooters that they got in Trey Murphy. And if they make a deal for Brandon Ingram, then you have other guys like Herb Jones who can flourish more in the starting lineup. They have an interesting roster. And even if they decide to bring somebody like CJ McCollum off the bench so that you can then start a Trey Murphy or Herb Jones, I could definitely see them playing around with that idea. Now, they are a little short on the center position with the depth right now. They have Aviv Misi and Daniel Tice being your centers. They have decided to state that they're going to play Zion a little bit more at the small ball 5, and I actually really like that for them. Reminds me a little bit of the Houston Rockets a few years ago when they picked up, when they put PJ Tucker at the 5, and he's a 6'5 center, but add a 60-inch vertical to PJ Tucker kind of thing. I think Zion can handle his own, plays a lot bigger than he actually is, similar to a Draymond-esque when it comes to playing up bigger than he is. The 5 seed in the East, it is the Cleveland Cavaliers for me. They're a very good roster. I think that they could be a lot higher. I think they could be a 4 through 2. That wouldn't surprise me at all. Honestly, this 1 through 5 here is very mixable. You could mix and put anyone 1 through 5, honestly, except for maybe 2 through 5. Maybe I should say that. I think 1 is pretty solid and locked up, but I'll get to that. The Cleveland Cavaliers have a really good roster that has had some question marks, and I think that they're going to address those by the trade deadline. If it's not working and it's not gelling well, then they're going to look to trade one of the bigs or one of the guards. It's not going to be Donovan Mitchell because they re-signed him to a big deal, so it'll be Darius Garland. But I could see a position where somebody like the Spurs is looking for Darius Garland-esque or, Trae Young, as I spoke about earlier, and you make a deal like that. And then you also look at somebody like the Pelicans looking for a center. You might talk to them about Evan Mobley or Jarrett Allen. It's just interesting to see. They have a lot of flexibility on this roster. I don't necessarily know if they will trade one of those 3 guys that I just mentioned, but there's a huge possibility that it does happen. So number 5 in the West, I have the Phoenix Suns. Now the Suns are intriguing because they brought in a traditional point guard. Bringing in Tyus Jones is huge. He's going to help them out dramatically. So Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, and Bradley Beal can just go back to playing their game, not having to worry about running the offense per se. You have your guy now that's not going to be looking to score. He's going to be looking to just set up plays for those 3 guys. And then you still have Jusuf Nurkic on this roster. The bench, they did the best possible that they could. They, of course, still have Grayson Allen on the roster. I really like that for them being one of the best 3-point shooters last year. So now at number 4, I've got the Orlando Magic. The Orlando Magic, I know a lot of people, especially in my last one with the tier ranking list that I did a month or so ago, they were like, oh, why would you put, the Bucks or the Cavs below the Magic? I just really like the acquisition of Kentavious Caldwell-Pope and another jump out of Paolo Banchero. I think Paolo is in a similar situation as we saw like Cade Cunningham, where we haven't even seen his full potential because the lane is constantly getting clogged because they don't have 3-point shooters. So, and with what he was able to do in dragging this team through the playoffs kind of thing and like fighting in the playoffs against the Cavs, it's impressive to see. And then you bring in somebody like KCP, who was a huge championship glue guy for the Denver Nuggets. I'm just impressed, and I'm interested to see what they can do, and I think that around the 4 seed is where they're going to land. 4 seed for the West, another team that people were like, last time I posted this video, they were like, oh, well, they should be a little bit higher. It is the Dallas Mavericks for me. I'm not super intrigued by Klay Thompson. I'm not going to lie. I think Derrick Jones Jr. just fits better on the roster than Klay Thompson, especially with the issue of we don't know what we're going to get out of Klay Thompson this year. It's worth the risk for sure, but you let Derrick Jones Jr. walk. That is the problem that I have with it, is I loved his defense and his versatility that he brought, and I don't think Klay Thompson can fill that necessarily. Now, of course, I could, just like I spoke about the Cavs with this 2 through 5, I could see the same thing with the Mavs. I could see them being all the way up to like the 2 seed, all the way low is honestly like the 5th or 6th seed. They have the roster to do either. But overall, I have them sitting at that 4 seed, which brings us to our top 3 with both. The 3rd seed in the West, I made an adjustment. It is the Philadelphia 76ers. Philly having Embiid, Paul George, and Tyrese Maxey, with the flexibility of having guys like Andre Drummond coming off your bench, gives for Embiid not to have to put in a huge full-on effort each and every game. You can kind of rest him a little bit and not lose too much on that rebounding side of the ball with Andre Drummond. Drummond, which is a guy that can pop off and give you 20, 25 rebounds in a single night, averaging like, even if he gives you a solid 8 points on just a couple dips from a pick and roll, simple, easy dunks from getting the ball from Tyrese Maxey and Paul George, they're gonna be really tough to defend, honestly. And I could see them being, again, 2, 3, 4, 5 in that area, even the 1 seed possibly. I think these top 3 teams are pretty universal. You could put them anywhere you want. So the 3 seed in the West, it is the Denver Nuggets. I think that they've always been a really good team with Jokic and Murray in the regular season. I think they're just going to continue that. They're just not going to be 1 or 2, in my opinion. I think that this is probably the weakest roster that we've seen out of them, just depending on Christian Braun and Peyton Watson, what we're going to get out of them this year. But I do think that Denver is right around this 3 area. At number 2, I have the New York Knicks, newly acquired Karl-Anthony Towns. They've got a lot of depth. They've got all the pieces they kind of need to compete with the top spot, which, of course, you know who the top spot is. But the Knicks, I like the trade. Dante DiVincenzo said he didn't want to take a step back. But, of course, when you bring in a guy like Mikal Bridges, you kind of have to ask Dante DiVincenzo to take a step back. So they looked at it and they said, okay, we knew Julius Randle wasn't going to fit in the roster. We knew that DiVincenzo wants to keep the similar role, but we can't offer that to him. Or we have to ask Mikal Bridges, who we just gave up a ton of picks for, to take a step back? No way. So we're going to send him over to Minnesota, and we're going to go get a star. And honestly, much needed star, because this roster lacks center, or they lack height. That 4-5 position they were lacking there. So you bring in Karl-Anthony Towns, and it's perfect. It is a good fit. I like it a lot. He's played with Tom Thibodeau before, so it seems like it's going to work out pretty well for them. And that brings us to the 2 seed. It is the Minnesota Timberwolves. Also, we're partners in that trade for DiVincenzo and Julius Randle. And here's why I love it for the Timberwolves. You get DiVincenzo, who's a 40% three-point shooter in the playoffs, right? Then you get Julius Randle, who replaces, of course, Cat. He doesn't do quite exactly everything Cat did, but he also fouls a whole lot less than Cat would, so it's a give or take. You have that depth that you need, and I don't really think you needed Karl-Anthony Towns on this roster. It is a business at the end of the day. We need to recognize that. So moving Karl-Anthony Towns was a business move. I don't think that they believed that Karl-Anthony Towns was that number 2 option on a championship contending team. So they were like, all right, let's move him over. And now you have some versatility on this roster where you could bring DiVincenzo off the bench, or you could start him, either or. And as well as with Mike Conley's injury history and age, that is going to be something that's concerning. So they brought in some depth. Number 1 seed in the East, Boston. And it's going to be Boston until it's not, kind of thing. Their roster is stacked. They brought everyone back, and they won a championship with it. So I think that you can't say anything else other than that. And then the Thunder. I think the Thunder, they had the best offseason out of any roster. They are ready to compete for a championship. So if you guys did enjoy this content, do me a huge favor, smash the like button, subscribe to the YouTube channel, comment down below on what you agree with, what you disagree with. Let's have a conversation in the comments down below. So with that being said, it's been another Heart Over Hype episode, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.